Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
Good morning. I'm Rob Woodard. This is Sunday Journal. Today I'm joined in the studio by Paula Peters. She is a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and is the executive producer of a new exhibit at the Plymouth Public Library. It's entitled Captured 1614. It tells the story of Indian men captured by Europeans in present-day Plymouth, and then they were sold into slavery in Spain. Good morning, Paula. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the exhibit. Let's start with a little background on the actual events that it depicts.
Sure. It is an exhibit that depicts a time in history that has quite honestly been rather a footnote, despite the fact that it is critical to ultimately the Plymouth colony being successful and established. Among the 20 men that were taken from Patuxet, which is present-day Plymouth, was Squanto. The ship that took these men then moved on to Nauset, which is Eastham, and took 7 more. These men were taken to Spain, and they were put up for sale into slavery. Most of them were saved by a group of monks, and we believe among those saved was Squanto, who ultimately went to live in London. He was considered an exotic servant to a man named John Slaney. Ultimately, he ended up coming back in 1619, but between 1616 and 1619, there was a great plague. All of the people of Patuxet perished in the plague. And so when he came back, there was nothing. He had no home, no one to come back to. And as we all know, in 1620, when the Mayflower arrived, Patuxet was the place that they were able to settle. And they actually felt that because the land was cleared and available for them, that it was some kind of divine province from God.
That when they arrived, they found this kind of fertile land that was available to them. When you say that the 20, or I guess 27 in total, slaves were saved by monks, what do you mean by that?
No, not 27 were saved. There were 27 total that were taken.
Okay.
Of the 27, we know that some of them, we don't know how many, were saved by monks who came and stopped the sale of the Indians into slavery in Spain. They said it was wrong and they stopped it. I'm not exactly sure how all that went down,
right.
But they were pretty effective.
And so then the men that were taken were then they just assimilated into Spanish society, or
it's anyone's guess what may have happened. It's probably. One might consider that many of them probably died from the same types of illnesses that ultimately wiped out nearly 100,000 indigenous people from Maine to southeastern Massachusetts in that great dying plague that I'm talking about from 1616 to 1619, because the Native people had no immunities to European illnesses. So the fact that any of them survived very long in Europe would be surprising. And Squanto must have been tended to very well, or built up immunities and was able to survive, and also able to learn, obviously, to speak English. And by the time he came back, was very well versed in English. So when the Mayflower arrived, and ultimately there was contact between the Wampanoag and the English, it was Squanto and another English-speaking native named Samoset.
Sure, who kind of acted as the liaison between the pilgrims and the native people. So tell me about the exhibit. What are some of the things that people are going to see here?
Well, we hope that people are very taken by the exhibit, because the images are, to be quite honest, they're very, very dramatic. We used all of our own Wampanoag people, young and older, but the young men who portray those taken They're very, very the impression that they give, the looks on their faces, it's an amazing thing to see. Even as I first looked at it when we put the exhibit together, it exceeded my expectations in terms of the impact that I think that it will have. And the other part of it is it's a multimedia exhibit. There are 5 standing panels that are in excess of 6 feet high and 3 to 3.5 feet wide, and those are images and text. And then there's the video impact statements, which can also be seen online, which allow some of our contemporary Wampanoag to take on the role of those who were left behind in Patuxet and in Nauset and tell the story of what that meant to them.
I can see. I'm looking at a picture here that we have, and you can see that it's a very convincing depiction of what happened here with these men. What was the catalyst for this project? What did you just wake up one day and say, "Hey, this is an important topic, and we need to get it before the public," or how did that come about?
Well. It's a story that's very commonly known among the Wampanoag, and it's a story that's also very well documented. But as I said, it's been a footnote up to now. The catalyst really for it to become this dramatic exhibit is the Plymouth 400 Committee. Ironically, they were asking for Native participation. They asked me to get onto their board of directors. Plymouth 400 is the group that has come together to plan events and activities around the commemoration of the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower. They understand that that's a story that can't really be told without including the Wampanoag story. So they wanted members of the tribe to be more engaged in the process. And quite honestly, it's been difficult. And I was really kind of torn about whether or not to do it, and finally agreed to do it, and agreed to do it bringing forward the concept of this project, because for the Wampanoag, 400 years starts now, because this is 2014. So it's no coincidence that this exhibit opened in November, American Indian Month, in 2014, marking the 400th anniversary of these men being taken.
Was this a common practice where the Europeans would just come and take the men and take them somewhere else and sell them off into slavery?
It was common not just to sell them into slavery, but for other reasons. Some and the journals of these mariners tell these stories in graphic detail. It's not something that I had to go very far to find primary source resources on. They would be taken as curiosities to bring back to Europe to say, oh, look at who we found in the wilderness, to be rescued from the wilderness, supposedly. They were also taken in order to learn the custom of the indigenous people and perhaps to convert them to Christianity. So there were a number of reasons why it was done, but yes, it was more common than you might think.
Mm-hmm. And you said that it was a very well-known story among the Wampanoag people, but yet a footnote to others. So when you were bringing together the materials for this exhibit, what sort of research were you doing, and how did you do it, and how long did it take you?
Well, the research really didn't take me very long at all. It's been something that I've been studying over the years for a long time. I mean, and it's not like it wasn't difficult to find. Let's put it that way. You can Google most of this information. You can Google John Smith and Thomas Hunt. Thomas Hunt was the name of the captain who took the slaves against the wishes of John Smith, and probably because it was so controversial even then. A little bit of backstory here, but as you all know, John Smith of Jamestown fame had his encounters with Native people there, and he had learned that it was not a good idea to go against the wishes of the natives. And he was actually on this tour of New England in 1614 in order to find ports where he might establish trade. He also was looking for places potentially to settle. So he really didn't want to he didn't want to offend the indigenous people. So for Thomas Hunt to have done what he did was really counterproductive to John Smith's mission, and he writes about that in his journal.
Okay. And how long? Let's get back to the exhibit. What specifically, when people visit the library, are they going to be seeing?
Well, they'll see, the standing panels,
right,
and the text on the panels, which it's really just a teaser to the overall information that's available. But it begins to tell the story, and then there's one panel that has a video monitor. You can walk up to it and touch the screen, and it will lead you to the various impact statements. There's also an introduction to the exhibit, which I'm really, really proud of, because the narrator for the introduction is the chief of our tribe, Vernon Lopez, who did a phenomenal job narrating that. And that can also be seen online as well.
Mm-hmm. And how long will it be on exhibit?
The exhibit is designed to grow exponentially over the next 6 years, because it is actually it's not just a part of, it's the first exhibit of Plymouth 400. And it will grow. Each year in November, we will be adding some element to it. It will move about. It will stay at the Plymouth Public Library until March 15th, and then on April 1st, it will be moved to the Pilgrim Monument Memorial Museum in Provincetown, where it will stay until June 30th. The plan is to then bring the exhibit to Mashpee for part of the summer, and then to Martha's Vineyard for the other part of the summer. We don't have locations established just yet, but we will. And we hope that there will be other requests by venues to host it. It's designed to move about. We really want people to see it, to learn the story. So far, I've had incredible feedback from people who have seen it and are grateful that this part of the story is now being told.
And you are listening to Sunday Journal. I'm Rob Woodard. Today I'm joined in studio by Paula Peters. She's a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and is the executive producer of a new exhibit at the Plymouth Public Library entitled Captured 1614. It tells the story of Indian men captured by Europeans. So when you said that you're getting incredible feedback, what are some of the people, what are they saying to you about it?
Well, people are just grateful that that this part of the story is told, and it's kind of funny that for all these years you read about this part of history, and you hear about Squanto and Samoset, stepping out into the village and saying "Welcome, Englishmen" in their own language, and people are pretty, they're shocked and amazed and comfortable with oh, isn't that cool that they knew how to speak the language, but no one really asks the question why and wants to know the backstory. So for that, people are really fascinated by knowing how that occurred, and there's so much more to the story. There's the web page that is on the Plymouth 400 site for Captured 1614 also has two papers that I wrote, which not only tell more of the story. They also have all of the they cite the sources that I used for telling the story, and people are amazed by that. They're like, "Wow! I mean, this is not a secret." But we oftentimes in the Native community, when we talk about history, we stress the word "his story," and overall, this exhibit is called Our Story, and it's for a reason, because we haven't really had an opportunity to tell that story in our own voice. And I'm grateful that Plymouth 400 actually is giving us that opportunity. And I was really initially a little surprised, to be honest, to go back to, how this all started, because when I went to that particular meeting, the committee, and I asked, if I brought this concept forward, I fully expected them to say, no way, we're not going to tell that story.
Right.
And not only did they let us tell it, they funded it, and they allowed us full editorial and content control. So what you see when you go to see this exhibit is truly our story.
Now, is there a charge to go and view it, or is it just part of if you're visiting the library?
So long as it's in a public place, you would be able to view it. When it's at the Pilgrim Monument Museum, you would have to pay whatever the admission charge is to that museum. So it really depends on where it is.
And tell me a little bit more about Squanto. He obviously the most famous of these men that were captured. What eventually became of him? You said that he was brought over to London, where he was kind of a manservant, and then he came back to Plymouth and found that everything he knew had essentially gone away. And then what happened to him at that point?
Well, he did ultimately end up living in Pokanoket, which is where the Massasoit Usamiquin lived. He then became an emissary, but really only lived another year or so after the Pilgrims arrived, and then passed away.
Right, obviously a very important liaison again between the Pilgrims and the native people. Unfortunately, we are out of time, Paula. It sounds like a fascinating exhibit. I look forward to seeing it. I've been talking today with Paula Peters. She is a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. She's also the executive producer of a new exhibit at the Plymouth Public Library, which we heard will be traveling in the area. It's entitled Captured 1614. It tells the story of Indian men captured by Europeans in what is now present-day Plymouth. They were then sold into slavery in Spain. I'm Rob Woodard. This is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.